Hello, dear beloveds. It is such a joy to be here with you. It's been a little while since I've been live. I spent most of September in Italy and a little bit of time in Hong Kong. And now I'm back and I'm delighted to spend some time with you today talking about something that is dear, very, very dear to me. In fact, I've built an entire part of my institute around this particular symbol, and the symbol is that of the priestess. And I want to spend some time today talking to you about what she means to me, what this archetype represents to me and to the institute and to the third level program. In the third level, which is a year-long immersion, I train women as contemporary priestesses and spiritual leaders. And one of the things that I take great responsibility for and a great care around is the use of language. So that if I'm going to use the symbol of the priestess, the archetype of the priestess, I want to explain how she appears for me and what she represents, especially as part of the training of the third level, because it's a very carefully chosen symbol. Even though the idea of the priestess in our contemporary spirituality is gaining more and more attention and is something that many women feel drawn to, I think it can be used in lots of different ways by different people at different times. And of course, my job is to be very clear about how I am unleashing that symbol and what it is that I want for the women who walk the path of the third level to gain in terms of understanding their true nature as a contemporary priestess. So let's spend some time looking at that. I also want to sort of put out a bit of a provocation, as I want to do, around the idea of being able to put down our need to seek healing for ourselves, and how we can be careful not to align the constant pursuit of healing with doing the work of spirituality, because for me the two things are very, very different. But if we are conflating them, we can think that self-obsession is spiritual seeking, and I want to clarify that those things are actually very different. So who is the priestess to me, and why do I use this symbol, this archetype in the third level and in the work that I do? So the priestess is a sacred archetype, a sacred feminine archetype, and she has existed as part of our consciousness from the beginning of human civilization. Her work is to be the bridge between the divine, or the fifth dimension, pure energy, pure consciousness, and the third dimension, or the level of form and the material plane. She is not aloof or separate from the 3D reality, the world of the material plane. She's very much part of that world, and she's immersed in that world, and her work is in service to that world, but not through imitating the 3D, not through just simply being part of the dream, but rather to bring the divine, to bring that non-material plane, or the plane of pure consciousness, into and invested into the world. So her superpower, if you like, is to be able to see with spiritual sight and human sight at the same time. The confluence, or the coexistence of these two states, is what creates the priestess archetype, in my opinion, and certainly in the training that I offer as part of the third level, as part of the entire institute, is that it's the coexistence of the mundane and the extraordinary, the capacity to be in the world but to see the world from outside of it at the same time. So the priestess is not sitting in a monastery or segregated from the world. She's not the goddess on the mountaintop waiting to be worshipped. She is busy in the world, and her service is wherever she is. It's in the living rooms, it's in the coffee shops, it's in the birthing suites, it's in the temples, it's in the churches, it's wherever the woman who holds that archetype within her of the priestess shows up, is where she will be doing her work. And her service is always to infuse the divine, or the sacred, into the mundane. So she brings holiness where others would only see the mundane and the dirty and the lowly and the non-important. She imbues holiness into every environment that she is present in, and she does that by being the living, breathing demonstration of that holiness. And so that doesn't mean she's holier than thou. That doesn't mean that she is greater than and better than. It simply means that she does not doubt her own sacred divinity. She knows her spiritual self-esteem. She is absolutely certain of her purpose and her worth, and she knows her path is that of sacred service. She is here to get over her own stuff, her own doubt, to show up to a world that is desperately in need of what it is that she offers, in need of her medicine. And so her medicine will be as unique and diverse as she is. It isn't going to be the same for everybody. And in fact, this idea that to be a priestess you have to study with this particular mystery school in the south of France for 12 years before you can be initiated into that level is, to me, a redundant idea. We live in a contemporary age where the access of information and the distribution of knowledge is so fast that if we claim that there's special rituals and special rites and special things that mark someone as a priestess and someone else is not, then we are losing the opportunity to activate women. And to activate women into their spiritual leadership, to activate them into their power as a contemporary mystic and a priestess in the world. So the woman who is on the path of sacred service, who knows that her job is not to be self-obsessed, but to show up in service to the greater good, is the woman who I consider to be the priestess. She has to do the work. Of course, you cannot be the living, breathing embodiment of holiness. You cannot show up in your divinity if you're not willing to do the work, to meet your fear, to get up every damn day and say, this fear is an illusion. I'm prepared to meet it. It's directing me back to God, and I'm willing to go where I'm being invited. And that's what fear is. It's an invitation to meet yourself as God or the infinite at deeper and deeper levels. But she does not stop at that level of self-awareness and self-obsession. She is absolutely committed to integrating everything that she awakens to in and of herself so that she can offer it to the world. So she's very closely aligned with the mentor teacher archetype and with the healer alchemist archetypes. She may be a healer, she may be a teacher, she may be a leader, she may be an entrepreneur, she may be a midwife, she may be a doctor. She may show up in the world through many, many different forms of service. But everything about her life is motivated by the desire to serve the greater good. And that greater good may be her immediate community. It may be thousands of people on stage. It might be the person she sits next to on the bus. But she is always primed to be in service through her divinity. And that is really the difference. She's not trying to fix the world from a place of martyrdom. She's not trying to fix the world from a place of simply showing up to the illusion and buying into the suffering. It's not about empathy or sympathy. The priestess embodies compassion, and compassion is a fearless state. So we're able to view the world without judgment. We surrender our judgment of what is good or bad, what is right or wrong, but we show up with a willingness when we're in our priestess archetype to alter things for the better, to shift consciousness permanently from fear to love. And of course, that shift has to be an internal shift. It has to be something we're willing to show up to every damn day within ourselves. So the priestess is really on the path of service by doing the work. She is the living, breathing demonstration. She's not going to say one thing in public and go home and behave completely contradictorily in secret, in her own privacy. Her life is congruent. She is congruent between head and heart, and she walks the path with clear conscience. Caroline Mace, the great contemporary mystic, says that when you want to increase your intuition, increase your spiritual service, look to your conscience. Because when we are lying to ourselves, when we're saying one thing in public and we're doing another thing in our own personal lives, in our own action, when we're standing on the temple steps and saying, hey, be like me, I'm amazing, and then we go home and we're angry and bitter and we don't meet our fear, then we're not congruent. We're out of alignment, and that incoherence will be very easily read by people around us, even if they're not seeing you in the context of your private life. So the mystic or the contemporary priestess must be congruent in all aspects of her life, and that is because the changes that she makes are primarily internal. So we begin with the self, and here is where I want to speak a little bit about the difference between self-obsession and doing the work. one of the things that one of the pitfalls of spiritual seeking that we can fall into is to continually believe that there's more and more and more and more and more work that we have to do in order to be ready to serve. So we constantly delay showing up in the world as the priestess by saying, oh, well, I've got to clear this fear, I've got to clear this wound, I've got to clear that trauma, I've got to clear that injury, that time that person was mean to me, when that person did that thing to me. And we're constantly using our life, or lifetimes even, as an excuse not to show up on the path of service. And this becomes a self-obsession. A spiritual narcissism is another way to think about that, where we just become so inward looking that we're constantly seeking out it through the kind of egoic function to find more and more problems so that we never have to actually do the work. And we sit in a state of inertia where we're constantly looking to find more and more problems within us so that we can, as I say, keep delaying. When we're on the path as the priestess, we never doubt that the work will be lifelong. We never doubt that that work of inward seeking, of being on the path, of showing up to our devotion is a lifelong commitment. And if that we were ever to stop, then that would be the problem. But we don't let that become self-obsession. We let that motivate us. So what we do for ourselves, we then offer to the world. And because the first Hermetic law tells us there's only one of us here, we never rest in the idea that what we do just for ourselves. We are constantly attuned to the truth that what we do for ourselves, where we meet our fear and our doubt and we overcome our limiting beliefs, we do on behalf of all. And that truly is our service. We are then motivated to take action in the world, because remember, the priestess is not the goddess on the mountaintop, and she's not secreted away in the monastery. She is present in the world. She keeps showing up to the world because that is her mission, is to bridge the divine and the earthly, to be that conduit between those states, to hold the coexistence of those seemingly contradictory realms, because that is what allows other people to see that it's entirely possible to be human, flawed, and all the rest of it, and still be able to be in a powerful service to the world. So the priestess is not using her spirituality as a way to just become into a complete state of self-obsession. She's also not ignoring the need to be in deep devotion as part of her life. And in fact, every breath is devotion when she is on this path in the way that we teach in the Institute. It is a life, a whole of life, and that's why we call it a holy commitment, a holy path. It isn't about being holier than, it is about being whole within the self, so that you may offer that and be the embodiment of that and be the demonstration of that to others. And you take every opportunity that the world throws at you, and the world throws us lots of opportunities to awaken, as an opportunity to awaken. You don't see that as a failing. You don't see that as a reason you need to go and hide. You simply learn how to integrate the challenges that the world throws at you as a blessed opportunity, as a miracle to meet yourself as the infinite in bigger and bigger ways. So for me, that is the absolute essence of the archetype of the priestess, is that she is both the human and divine, meeting in the middle and showing others through being the embodiment and the demonstration of that, what it is to live with the coexistence of spiritual sight and earthly sight. And as a result, she can hold compassion where others would be drawn into fear, where others would judge, where others would look at a situation and say, this should not have happened, that's terrible, this blah, 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 blah. She's able to sit outside of the demands of the human ego. And while she might have her 5 minutes of self-pity, as Caroline May says, she is able to quickly course correct because of her devotion, which is part of her daily life. And so this is really the symbol of the priestess to me, and that's why we use this image in our work in the third level. And yes, you know, there are lots and lots of different mystery schools and lots of different traditions of the priestess, but there is no one idea of how the priestess is or should be in the world. And as we accelerate our awakening, we can certainly take from the ancients and from our ancestors what was good and worked and is right, but we must also be spiritually hugely innovative, to adapt to our times. And perhaps the greatest power we have is to synthesize great amounts of information in a very short amount of time and to be able to share that with others. And when we are able to do that, we are walking the path of the priestess, because everything we do is not just about how do I make things a bit better for myself, but how may I serve? And that's the question that she is constantly asking. How may I serve for the betterment of all? And some days that's just going to be about meeting your own fear, and other days that's going to be about writing a book that the world's going to read, and other days that's going to be about running a program, and other days that's going to be about, you know, just showing up at the shops in kindness and compassion and patience, and noticing if someone needs a hug or a gentle, you know, word. The priestess is never not on in her service, and yet that never is a burden, because that is the very highest purpose of her life. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for those of you who've joined me live and for letting me speak about this, because I don't want you to think that I use that symbol casually or in an empty way. It's something that I've considered and loved to meet over the course of the program, and it really did evolve from the very first group of 13 who became known as the Priestess Posse, which was a very unexpected but delightful thing that happened. And as a result of that, the idea of the Contemporary Priestess has become very embedded into the program, and she is our symbol, and she's our archetype, and we go to meet her in our work, and we go deep into the temple so that we may powerfully wed ourselves, but not so that we stay in the temple, so that we can walk back out the temple doors and move back out into the world in that state of sacred service. So this is how we avoid that self-obsession. We know that our spiritual seeking is always about how may I serve, and not just, you know, how do I kind of get to give my ego more and more attention, because that's really a very real possibility on this path of spiritual seeking. We can become self-obsessed, and we don't want to do that. I want to let you know that the interviews are now open for the next round of the 3rd level, and I'll share the link with you here once I'm done. If you are interested in knowing more, please do book an interview, because it's your opportunity to ask me questions as much as it's my opportunity to ask you some questions. And I hope you have the most glorious Tuesday. See you later.